and hand it to you, Chairperson Reckler.
Great. Good afternoon. I'd like to call the May 21st, 2021 budget meeting to order at 3:04. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Espinoza, may I ask you to translate on how to reach translations for those of us who speak Spanish?
I think because I already set her as the
Oh, you
translator,
set
she
her as
can't speak.
translator. Okay. Okay, so for those of you who need Spanish translation, just go to the interpretation globe, click on the Spanish button, and the English will be translated into Spanish. For those of you, if we have Spanish public comment or Spanish commentary and you speak English, please go to the interpretation globe and select English, and the English will be translated into Spanish. I would like to now read the land acknowledgement. We recognize that we are presently on the lands of the Chocheño, Muecma, Karkin, Ohlone peoples, and acknowledge them as the first inhabitants of the land we currently occupy. And, oops, sorry about that. And Dr. Rold, would you be able to take roll call, please?
I certainly can. Trustee Reckler, Chairperson.
I'm present.
And President Phillips, member.
Here.
All
And-
present and accounted for.
Okay, great. And then we'll move on to 1B, which is approval of the agenda. Is there anything on the agenda that you would like to adjust or remove, Trustee Phillips?
No.
Okay, I'm good with it as well. Can we move to approve as stands? I motion. You good? Okay. All right, with that, then we will move on to public comment for items not on the agenda.
So I'm looking right now. We have actually a very star-studded audience, but I'm not sure if any of them want to speak. So I'm looking for hands. And we do have a hand up. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute Jessica Ross.
Oh wait, let me put. I have a timer. Hang on.
Are you ready?
Yeah,
Hang
go
on a
ahead,
second.
Jessica.
Hang on one second. You
Okay.
here? All right, go ahead. Did I do that right? Oh wait, I'm sorry. Hold on one second.
You know what, Veronica can probably get the timer up too. There we
I
go.
got it. I got it now. Okay, we're gonna go with 3 minutes, and because this is the longer one for the budget. So go ahead.
Hi, it's so nice to see all of you. I actually just entered this meeting, so if I'm speaking on an agenda item, please just stop me in the middle of it and I will speak up later. I just wanted to speak up. I'm a school counselor at Pinole Valley High School. I know I've spoken with many of you who are on here now, and I know we're in the middle of bargaining and trying to make trying to figure out how we can make our schools as best as possible. I want to speak specifically to the requests of school counselors and why they're so important, and specifically to a zero budget item, a zero money item that really makes the world of difference in how our students are cared for at the middle school level. Specifically, school discipline is not included in the school counselor job description. However, over time, administrators have placed that upon middle school counselors and required them to do school discipline, including giving out suspensions and expulsions to students. For the record, that is counterproductive to the role that counselors have, the primary role of being a student advocate. What that means is that we are asking students to go to the person that would suspend them for things when they are crying, having a traumatic experience, needing to fill out a report of abuse, and having any other difficulties through the school day, some of which relate to the difficulties that they have with teachers and administration that they really need to get out somehow and work through. This keeps counselors from being able to do restorative justice practices that they are trained in at the middle school level. So it's really a small budget item for you all to consider because it's literally $0, but it makes a huge difference in the way that we support our middle school students as counselors. So I urge you, as you're looking to bring that counselor caseload down, which I know Trustee Reckler and President Phillips, we've talked about before, and I know that you support bringing that school counselor ratio down to 250 to 1, and also getting counselors into both our K through 8s and our elementary schools. In addition to that, I just encourage you to focus on that $0 budget item and really allow our middle school counselors to respond to and preempt issues for our middle school students, especially as they need as much support as possible. Prior to COVID, those middle school counselors did not have the time because of discipline to do the support that they needed to do. And we really need that coming back from COVID. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you. Our next public speaker is Joseph Glatzer.
Hi, Joseph Glatzer. Thank you for calling on me. I'm a 7th grade history teacher at Hercules Middle, and I'm just speaking today in terms of class size and also counselor caseload. I think it's extremely important that we have permanent class size reduction in the next contract, which we're negotiating between UTR and the district right now. When you look at West Contra Costa's current class sizes in secondary, which is my area, 39, it's appalling. I don't know how anybody can sit there and say 39 students in a 7th grade class or a 12th grade class or anything in between is okay. I would ask the board members and anybody here in this meeting, would you like to send your child to a class of 39? Would you feel comfortable doing so? Do you think your child would have their needs met in that high of a class size? And I'd also make the point that there are, when we're told that the district can't afford it, you know, what I wonder is, well, where is the money going? Because when we look at other districts, somehow they find a way to afford it, even ones that are very similar to ours. So we look at a district like Hayward, which has a fair number of Title I schools. We look at a district like Antioch, which also has a fair number of Title I schools, and they have plenty of high needs areas just like we do. And so Hayward in secondary has 34. 34, that's 5 less. Antioch has 26 in secondary. That's quite a bit, even more less. We look at San Francisco. They have 30 in middle school and 30 in high school. PE only goes up to 37 and our PE is 55. Are people paying attention to what's going on in other districts? How is it that they can afford it, but we can't? What's going on here? And so I know that we all support the goal of educating our students and meeting their needs. And so I want us to act together in this current negotiation and, you know, end the proposals that are saying that we just need to stick with what we're doing and it's going to be okay, or that there's some possibility of bankruptcy if we're going to meet the students' needs. Because when we look at even just Title I funding, that went from $640 per student to $2,600 per student. When we look at new state funding, that is $17.7 billion more dollars to education in the state budget. You know, that is increasing ongoing funds for LCFF, 5% increase, 4% increase in ongoing special ed funds. And so we need to be in touch with reality of what's going on with the budget and what we're actually getting, both from the state level and the federal level. And keep in mind that we do have the funding to get closer to meeting our students' needs. And of course, we need more funding from the state to get to where we really need to be, which is much smaller numbers. But I think the UTR proposal is extremely reasonable and extremely doable. And I want us to reach agreement on that as soon as possible so we can bring back students to the district that may have left, and we want them to come back because for every student we lose, that's funding we lose. And so we need to invest money to keep our students coming to this district. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last public speaker, and if I get the last name wrong, I apologize. Suzanne Balmaceda, you may unmute.
Okay, there we go. Hi, everybody. Thanks for allowing me to speak. I'm also wanting to speak again about the class size and the counselor caseloads. And I know that we all agree that we need to improve student outcome in the district, and this is one way that we can definitely do that. There's a Tennessee study of 11,500 students in K to third grade over 4 years, and they compared normal class size of 22 to 25. Small class size is 13 to 17 in this randomized study, but the smaller class size achieved 8% lower, 8% higher scores in reading and 9% higher in math. And these benefits were especially good. They were stronger even for minorities and low-income students. And students in the smaller classes went to college at a higher rate. And so I know the district's been working hard on, the race and equity work, which I really appreciate. It's definitely long overdue. But in order to actually, really help all these students achieve what we want them to achieve and for them to have equity in their educations, we've got to decrease the class sizes and the counselor caseloads and the PE class sizes, because the PE class sizes are just dangerous. I've heard of a lot of kids getting injured in these PE class sizes. And to the budget, I know there is money coming in. There's the Biden relief bill with money coming in. There's new state funding. There's new federal funding. And like Joseph said, if we have smaller class sizes, we're going to retain these students and they're not going to leave. We have a big problem with charter schools, kids leaving the district to go to charter schools and to go to private schools. And I understand that because it's really hard for our teachers to meet our kids' needs with these huge class sizes. So I feel like this is the time to invest the money that's coming in to directly affect our students. And I'm speaking as a teacher and as a parent. My own kids have had very high class sizes and they feel like it's not always appropriate to even ask their teacher a question because their teachers are too busy. And so that breaks my heart to think my own kids think they can't ask their teachers a question because they're too busy. And the teachers are, and they're all working so hard. So please use the funding that's coming in to reduce class size, reduce counselor caseloads, and including PE class sizes, because that's crucial. Thank you so much, and thanks for all your hard work.
We do have one more public comment. It's actually one of our panelists, County CBO, Bill Clark.
Tony, thank you for calling on me. I want to thank you for including FICMAT on your agenda today. I appreciate the transparency and having them come forward and present their report. And thank you, West Crompton board members. I'd also like to recognize Superintendent Lynn Mackey is here, County Superintendent, and our board member, Sarah Butler. Thanks, Tony.
With that ends public comment.
Great, and thank you to all that called in for comment, and thank you to all that are attending. Okay, so let's move on to item 2A, which is the FICMAT Fiscal Health Risk Analysis.
So I will introduce this and then I'm going to share my screen and let them present. We have with us 2 members of the Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team from FICMAT. They were brought into the district when we had our 3rd consecutive qualified certification. As the trustees know, in 2019, when we started the year, we had a significant structural deficit, $49.9 million. We had to borrow funds from our retirement fund. We had to utilize reserves, and we had to address significant budget reductions. While we were going through that process, we moved to a qualified certification. Even with the 30 million in cuts that were addressed for this school year, we entered this last school year with a structural deficit of 18 million. The pandemic changed some things and we were able to have some additional savings and address some of the operational pieces with one-time funds, but there still remained a structural deficit underneath. FICMAT is required to do a fiscal health risk analysis based on where we were at the first interim. We were very happy to have them come in, because when they review systems, they look at things that we might not be looking at operationally. They look at best practices. And so today they're going to present their findings. Some of them are areas that we need to do better at. Some of them are areas that we have not followed and gotten completely the way it needs to be based on alignment. And it gives us the ability to truly understand where we can improve, where we can make a difference, and where we can try to become more transparent to the community we work with. So Robbie Montalbano and John Flew are here to present. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'll let them introduce themselves and their backgrounds as they go forward, and then they can give you the context of this, and then we'll have questions at the end.
Well, thank you. Although you did such a nice introduction, I'm going to skip to page 3 of my script here. Again, my name is Robbie Montalbano. I'm an intervention specialist with FICMAT, and I have been with the team for about 1.5 years now. I have about 28 years in education prior to joining FICMAT. So I'm very happy to be here, and thank you all for allowing us to join you and present, and I'll let John introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Von Flew. I'm a chief analyst with FICMAT. I've been with FICMAT off and on since 2010. In between, I took a little stint of 4 years and was the CBO for the county of Kern, superintendent of schools. I've also worked in districts throughout Kern County. And happy to be, I actually lead the fiscal health risk analysis projects throughout the state, and then jump on teams as needed to assist.
Great. So you have the specialist here in John. So before we get started, I wanted to say thank you to Superintendent Duffy, the board, and Tony, and all the team members we spoke with. We spent a number of days, all day long, via Zoom to talk with a wide variety of individuals, and everyone was very welcoming. Everyone was very forthcoming, very helpful, and it was very clear that you have some great employees working at your district and working hard to do good things. So thank you for that. It's always nice. It makes the process easier, and we hope that you find the report helpful. So for those of you, because I don't know the makeup of the attendees, I'll do a very brief historical for those who are not familiar with FICMAT. Our primary mission is to assist local K-14 educational agencies to identify, prevent, and resolve financial challenges. We don't just do that. We also provide support and training for the development of CBOs, chief business officials, and try to help create efficient organizational operations. So as you mentioned before, best practices. So that's a little bit about us. There's a lot more in the study, but I think you can all read, and we're not going to go over every single item in this report, but maybe hit just some of the highlights. So as mentioned before, FICMAT typically doesn't engage directly with school districts who are showing signs of distress unless they're invited to do so by the district or potentially the county superintendent. But in 2018-19, the Budget Act provided for FICMAT to become a little bit more proactive. So in certain cases, FICMAT could come in, and we still work with the county superintendent and the district before we come in, but it's a more proactive approach. So in some cases, we can come in and do one of these fiscal health risk analysis in hopes that it helps the district get either on a better path or correct some areas or focus areas that maybe they've not seen in the past. So some of those conditions would be a disapproved budget, a negative interim report certification, like West Contra Costa, 3 consecutive qualified interim report certifications, a downgrade of a certification by the county, or a lack of going concern. Obviously, we're here due to the 3 consecutive qualified interim report certifications. Again, we're going to focus on systems and processes that may need improvement. Those that are functioning really well, we're not going to talk about. It's a deficit model. Lots of good things happening in the district, but we are going to focus on areas where you may wish to focus some attention in the future.
So no positives for Dr. Wold tonight.
Your positives came up front. You guys have been really great and we appreciate it. And there are lots of good things going on. So, but yes, so if towards the end of this report, it feels as if you're being beat up, I'm sorry, but that is our model, or you would never get to go home to dinner. So, to start out, just for everyone to remember, this report was triggered and we were engaged at the time of the 2020-21 first interim report. So rewind back in your mind back to that time. A lot has happened since then. And we know that the district self-certified as positive at the second interim report and that the county has concurred. However, this report will be focused mainly on the first interim and in some cases prior to that. If at any time there are questions, I'm going to kind of run through our talking points from the report. Obviously, we'll entertain questions depending on how Trustee Reckler or Tony, how you want to run the meeting. That's up to you. I can't necessarily see hands, so I'll let you all direct questions. But if any of the panelists have questions while we're reporting, please feel free to break in. I may not see you, so just break in.
Yeah, so what we do about the process of doing is you make your report. If something's super unclear, I'll jump in, but I've already read this and I think it's really absorbable.
Okay.
I think it's written, for common, it's really readable. And so we'll go through that, and then after that, we'll ask some questions. Unless,
Okay,
we're really
sounds good. So again, we're not going to go through every single question. You saw there were a number of questions we asked your team about, very in-depth questions in certain areas. We're going to hit on just some of the main points, which are actually outlined in that summary that you have in front of you. After that, if you want to go in depth into any of questions we didn't cover, we can do that also. So obviously the main trigger for the analysis is self-certifying as qualified for 3 consecutive reporting periods. So qualified certification means the district may not be able to meet its financial obligations for the current and 2 subsequent fiscal years. Really the reason that we are on 3, that we look at 3 consecutive qualified certifications, is because it may indicate that, you haven't really addressed the potential insolvency issues or fiscal issues that are coming up if you're still going on that 3rd consecutive qualified. So that's why we come in at that point. The FHRA, which is what we call the fiscal health risk analysis, is reflective of the district at first interim. It shows a high risk of insolvency. It doesn't mean that you would become insolvent or that you are insolvent. It is a list of risk indicators that are present in districts that show signs of fiscal distress. So taking them seriously is important, but it doesn't mean that insolvency is imminent. So I just want that to be clear. Ideally, you take a look at the recommendations in the report and you're able to address some issues that would hopefully avoid it. The whole idea of being proactive. So one of the main areas, and I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know, you've been experiencing declining enrollment in your traditional schools with an increase in charter school enrollment. So that you'll find in section 10 of the report. You don't need to jump there now, but you have been declining. There's a year or two, maybe there's a little bump, but overall declining, and it looked like, at least preliminarily for the current year, 2021, there was a significant drop. Where that comes to play out in the future remains to be seen. But that's a big thing. Districts deal with all over the state declining enrollment. You know, they don't leave in nice little packages of students. They leave all over the district in various grades that play havoc on your schedules and your staffing. The one thing that is important when you look at overall declining enrollment over year is the idea of right sizing. And there's no silver bullet, there's no good answer about when and how. It's local to the district and how best to meet those needs locally. But at the same time, right sizing the district's budget, staff, facilities towards enrollment ideally will help you keep those things in check. Again, it is completely specific to a district. So there's no one answer. Just because your neighboring district did something does not necessarily mean it's the right answer for you. It may be, may not be. So that's the first item. The second item really, well, it's two things really. So it's the idea of this structural deficit that Dr. Wald mentioned earlier, projecting and having a period of deficit spending that's been going on for a number of years. So the important takeaway on deficit spending is, could be planned deficit spending. You're certainly getting quite a bit of one-time and ongoing dollars coming into the district. It's very important when that happens that you're careful and that you're monitoring what the actual structural deficit, if there is one, of a district is, because it can so easily be masked by these one-time dollars that suddenly your position on paper looks great because you have all this money coming in. It's important to always take a look at, okay, if I were to just remove that for a moment, where am I based on ongoing revenues and expenditures, so that I can keep my eye on the ball when those dollars go away, barring anything else happening, you know, where are we going to be at? So that is probably the biggest takeaway, is really keeping your eye on that deficit spending. How much, how fast, and when you look at those multi-year projections, yes, things will change. I guarantee if you go back 3 or 4 years to your multi-year projections, the ending was different. But it's the best guess you have today, based on all the factors that you know. And it's going to become even more difficult when the final budget is signed and you have that influx of one-time dollars. I don't think any of you will argue that they're needed. Learning loss mitigation as a general topic is huge. And I don't envy the decisions and the needs in front of you as a school district and as a board. But it is important to make sure that you don't rely on those dollars to take care of the problem, because underneath there is a problem. So that leads me to another main area to look at, and it's part of this structural problem. So you are a district that spends better than 90% of your unrestricted budget on salary and benefits. That's in total. That is not any one group. That's high. It's higher than the average. Again, we're not here to tell you that you shouldn't do that. It is higher than the average. And what I think you'll find and have found is it's very difficult to make changes in a budget when 90% of it is people. So that is going to be one area that over the next few years, as you try to wrestle with what is your true deficit, structural deficit, and how you're going to fix it going forward, one of the things the one-time dollars do for you is give you some flexibility to not have a knee-jerk reaction or to react quickly. It should buy you some time to make thoughtful, targeted decisions. But when a district has that much of their unrestricted budget on salary and benefits, and again, it's not any one group, it becomes more difficult to make changes. There's a certain amount of money you have to get the lights on, even if the kids aren't in your physical plant and they're working on computers. You still have other than costs to take care of. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But that becomes more difficult. And so collective bargaining, as you know, and I know you're in the middle of it and we don't comment on it, it's a significant impact and it's a big conversation to have. So ultimately, those are the key takeaways for the district. And it really does center around, as Tony had mentioned before, this idea of keeping track of the structural deficit of the district and really being honest about what it is and what it isn't, what you do know and what you don't know. There are times that, we do the best we can with the information we have. All people in school districts, but at the same time, taking the time out to allow us to come in and do this, to share with you, hopefully it'll help. But really keeping your eye on the ball will hopefully get you through to a space where maybe fiscal stability is a little bit better. John, did you want to add anything?
I will concur with your thoughts and comments on the district. Couple of things that I would share is going to your employee compensation component. The state average is hovering right around 88% for unified districts. And so you're looking at yours, if yours is at 90, you have 10% available for other things, whereas a like district might have 12%. And you think, well, it's only a 2% difference, but that is a tremendous amount of money when you look at the big picture in district wide. The other thing is that in employee compensation, as you go through, and when you were qualified certification, you were required to do this, but it's a great practice to do, is always make sure that you do the pre-settlement analysis when you have negotiations, and share that pre-settlement analysis with the county for review, with your board members, with your team, so that you can look at what is the impact of this collective bargaining preliminary agreement. And then once that hits, if that is agreed upon, it's a requirement for the CBO and superintendent to sign off on it. If they're not required to sign it, but they're required to certify it. So if they don't certify it, by certifying, they're agreeing that the district can afford the agreement. And that is a very powerful, but a very conflicting, I guess, position to be in, very difficult position to be in order to do that. So it's important that the board and district understand that position and watch for that signing of those certifications, and only act if they are signed. And that's your verification that the superintendent and CBO support and can the affordability of those actions. And so that's important. Those are key processes. Looking at the pre-settlement analysis, making sure that it's been reviewed and looked at and verified, making sure that the CBO and the superintendent support it, and then before the board does. So that's just an important piece I wanted to add.
So Tony or Trustee Reckler or Trustee Phillips, is there anything you'd like to have us cover more? Any particular questions you'd like us to go over? Again, the report is fairly self-explanatory. We don't want to labor over each individual item, but are happy to go into more detail for any of you.
I'll just jump in real quick. Going through it, there were several areas that clearly jumped out that we need to do a better job. Obviously, not having signed certifications, as John just explained, is problematic in many, many ways, because ultimately the board can only act decisively when they have the accurate information. So the end result is we still do have a high level of risk. Would you identify in your mind maybe the 1 or 2 areas that in the report you felt we really need to focus on improvement? Because I always
Could
like to
ask
look
you-
at, yeah.
Can I have you hold on that? Because I
Yeah.
actually was going to go there, if that's okay.
Got it.
So what I had this idea of is that I do have some clarifying questions. And then I did want to have a discussion about, all right, we got this report. You've given us all these findings. I certainly have my own opinions about what's important and what's not. But I thought that I would have the experts bang out for us what they think is the most important, and then how, as a board, we're going to codify this and ensure that that we've got correction action going. So if that's okay, if I could go that way.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. So first, thank the 2 of you for being here. I just love it when the experts come and explain it. This is like the greatest thing of the pandemic for me. I mean, if we're pulling anything out of it, it's being able to get these brain trusts. And thank you for the work on the report. And if anybody is in the audience and you haven't read the report, I do suggest you take a little time and read it. This is totally readable. This is almost everybody can access this. And if you need some help, please call me or call Dr. Walden. He'd be happy to walk you through it. But it's really absorbable. It's written for regular people, I think. So thank you for that, and thank you for your accessibility. The second thing is, did we not birth you with AB 1200? Are we?
You did, and
Proud moment.
I was going to avoid mentioning that
You're
altogether.
going to thank us for.
Thank
So
you
you
for the
came
job. Yes.
Came over. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank
but
you.
yes.
Trustee Reckler?
Yes.
Trustee Reckler, I was going to ask the same question, but that is an extremely important question because it gives context to our district, where we've been, where we're back at. So I don't want that to pass as almost like an inside joke. I want them to really explain to everybody in the audience what you were asking and what the answer meant, how they came into existence, and how that's connected to where we are right now, because people need to understand.
Yeah, sure. Go right ahead.
And so, yeah, thank you for that. And you're absolutely right. While it was a little bit of awkward
Not for me, no.
discussion there, because it is, but you're absolutely right in bringing it up. And essentially, the Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team and AB 1200 came into existence because of Richmond Unified School District. I have had to work very hard not to call you Richmond because most of my family went through Richmond Unified and graduated from Richmond High School. So I do have to work on calling you West Contra Costa. But that was in fact the birth of FCMAT and AB 1200. It says something. It was the first time that a district had gotten to a point of what we'll call bankruptcy, but districts don't go bankrupt. So back then it looked different. The district was insolvent. It works a little differently today when districts become insolvent. But the bottom line is that is where you see the invention of county oversight and state oversight of county offices as well. And then later AB 2756, which brings in a lot of the collective bargaining review and disclosure. I'm glossing over all the details. I'm sure any of you can read up on that, but it is important. You were the first district in the state of California. And of course, there are many of us, while I enjoy working for FCMAT, would not for one moment want to see your district revisit that part of history, not for the number of years that you've managed to move forward and over that time do great things. So that's for those who don't know. And Trustee Phillips, you're absolutely right. Shouldn't be glossed over.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, and thank you for providing that context. If we could go, if you could scroll up to page 3, I just have a question on the studies that you guys have proposed, you have conducted. And really the study was, I think that 2009, 2010, 2011, number of studies that you've done, that all makes sense with the Great Recession and the number of districts that fell off the fiscal cliff. I'm assuming that's the
Mhm.
reason. And then when you jump into 16, 17, really 17, 18, is that where you said you were called in, or you were allowed, you had greater latitude to?
That would have been in 1819, not the actual year, but it was the 1819 Budget Act that allowed us to become more proactive. So you're actually not going to see that on that graph. You're going to need to see, and you'll see it in the year 1819, but what you're not seeing is 1920, 2021, how many of these FHRAs we've gone in and done under that.
Okay, and so then in 16, 17 or 17, 18, where we get this little spike back up, was there something that happened that caused that to pop?
So remember that these are all of our studies, not just fiscal health risk analysis. And we frequently have districts who will make contact with us and say, as an example, hey, new superintendent, new CBO, new assistant, maybe new board members, you know, we'd like to have you come in and take a look at how we do XYZ and comment on best practices. We do a lot of studies where you have districts that are growing and they don't know how to grow. I know that's not something you're dealing with, but we've been in a number of districts who are declining. And how do we deal with that? How do we look at right sizing? Those types of things. So there's all sorts of reports, and they're all available on our website. You can just even look at the titles of some of them and see what they are. So the graph may not depict exactly what's going on fiscally in the state, because there may be other reports that we're doing. John,
Okay.
do you want to add
No,
anything
that's
to that?
enough. I was
Okay.
just curious. Yeah, I don't need, that's fine.
Okay.
The other question is what kind of a scale? It wasn't clear to me what kind of a scale you guys rank on, and I might have just missed this in passing, but we are a fiscal solvency risk level of high. Is there like low, medium, high? You have no chance in hell. Get the state auditor now. I mean, is there like,
Right.
what's the?
I'm actually going to toss it to John because
Okay.
he is the inventor and expert on that portion.
So thank you, Robbie. So yes, there's high, moderate, and low risk levels. And the way the report is set up, if you look on page 9 of the report, you'll see a breakout score by section. That's right up, go up above that right there. So you'll see a breakout score by section. Each question and each section has its own weight to the report. So this is a distribution, and it gives you, I think it's on the top of the next page, a score of 37.4. So your score is 37.4. And what 37.4 is, and I apologize for this being all jumped over, but on the last page of the report, it gives you where that fits into the risk level.
Yeah.
And so I apologize for that, but so you can see here where high risk would be 40 and more, moderate risk would be 25 to 39.9. This is 100% was if you were doing everything wrong. But we look at these risk levels and apply them here. Now, the next question you're coming to mind is, why do you have a 37.4 and considered high risk? That is because there's certain questions, and at the front of the report, the fiscal status questions and the material weakness report sections, which are at the front of the report. So here you have, scroll down just a little bit, thank you. So you have this section, budget and fiscal status, currently without, and you had 3 consecutive qualifieds. And then there's these material weakness questions section right below that. Those questions in particular, if you get a no in one of those questions, will set a minimum risk level. So that doesn't elevate the score, but what it does, it sets a floor to the score. So for instance, highlighting 4.4, the district's cash flow forecast shows insignificant cash. If you don't have cash, guess what? your elevated risk score, I don't care if you did everything else right, you're elevated in your risk level. So that's the way the report works, and that's the way it identifies risk level. What we do is we try to do our best to identify what of these issues impact the district's risk level. And if you look at some, just going through the report, you'll find some that, okay, for instance, a new superintendent. Is a new superintendent going to elevate put a high level risk to the district rating? No, it has an impact, but it will not elevate the risk to the district. So there's certain things like that as we go through the report. And just to share, we're always learning and modifying this report about every year. We make some adjustments. We used to cover like ASB and certain things like that. And then we kind of came to the realization that ASB, while an issue, an internal control issue, doesn't really have an impact to the fiscal well-being of the entire district. And so we wanted to separate that and just address those things that have a fiscal impact on the district. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was helpful. President Phillips, do you have any other clarifying questions? Because then I want to talk about like, all right, we got this report. How do we, give us your best advice on what we should, tackle and how.
I do have some questions for them.
Are they clarifying, or do you want to just jump right into like, now what do we do?
Some of them may be clarifying, but they're not really they're not solution-oriented questions, if that's what you're asking.
Okay.
The ones that I have right now.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So the first question I have is actually for Dr. Wold. And the folks from FICMAT can answer this too. But there was a caller several callers, but there was one caller in particular who spoke about class size and about how districts in other places like Antioch are able to pay for lower class sizes. Why can't we? Where is the money going? And so what I want to ask of Dr. Walden, and I would love for the folks from FICMAT to weigh in on this as well, is what is the correlation between class size and pay? I mean, and I'm talking about salary amount. So what is the correlation between class size and pay? And then also, so for example, do they have an inverse correlation? And if they do have an inverse correlation, why is that? Including in our district and in others. What's that correlation between class size and pay? And also, let's start there.
So there often can be an inverse correlation. If you are spending more dollars on salary, then that is fewer dollars available for positions. You can have, however, a place where you have fewer very experienced teachers, and you can have more teachers at a lower scale and have lower class size and have a high expense for education. But for the most part, it tends to be that the higher total compensation, and when I say total compensation, it's not just salary, it's the amount that is paid for salary and the amount that is paid for benefits and the amount that is paid for post-retirement benefits that all add together. And so for ours, we do have a cap on our health and welfare at 80%. So there is a contribution, but there is an expense for that. We also, for many years, had retiree benefits that we still pay as you go. And so that's 4% of our budget that is spent, and it's the first 4% we spend. So that is our number one obligation. It's a promise, it's a commitment, it must be done, but that's 4%. So of a $400 million budget, that's $16 million that this district will absolutely spend for that. So that goes into your percentages as you go, and I'll let FICMAT correct any part of that.
Well, I'm not going to correct what you're saying. What you're saying is true. I will clarify that while we took a pretty good dive on the documents and the district, we did not go to the level of exactly how many positions you had at the lower end of the scale versus the higher end of the scale. Your explanation is spot on. It can be many factors. The one thing, because, you know, just it's not a criticism to be at 90%. It just limits your ability to make changes in other areas. So it's a local decision on how you want to do it, but ultimately, no matter what you're talking about, you can pretty much do anything you want. You just can't do it all. So when Tony talks about an inverse relationship, if you have, and I'm making a statement that is not necessarily about you, your district, if you have very high salaries and benefits, that may be in exchange for class sizes, but it may or may not be. I'm not speaking about your district because we didn't go into that detail. So please understand me when I say that. I've worked in a number of districts, as has John, and that is frequently the conversation. Is, you know, how do you balance it? You can do anything you want, but you cannot do everything. So where do you make decisions? But Tony would be in the best position, obviously, to talk more about the details of how your district fits into that 90% category. One of the other items in the report you'll see too is that you also look at settlement amounts. Again, we don't comment on collective bargaining for districts. That is up to you and your unions to settle. But you know, settling for more than funded COLA year after year after year can be a contributing factor. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It is an area where when you start looking at the affordability long-term, you have to look at that, particularly if you're a declining enrollment district, because it's funded COLA net of loss. Right now you're in a holding pattern because the state has said, we're going to hold you harmless on ADA, but the pay up is coming. And if the district is truly in that continuing declining enrollment, it's funded COLA less what you're losing in ADA funding. So I know that was kind of a bird walk on to LCFF, but that's the big question is how does all that work? So I don't know if that helped.
And I would like to, I concur with both Tony and Robbie. The whole concept of making sure you're looking at total compensation, that's salary, that's benefits, that's post-employment benefits. That's all contributing to the total compensation, and that's a key piece to look at. The second thing that I was kind of mentioned here, but I want to make some clarity. When you talk about how come teachers in another district might get paid more than in West Contra Costa, are you looking at salary schedules? And when you look at salary schedules, are you looking at, well, the highest attainable pay and, you know, or picking out a cell of how, you know, how teachers get paid, they get step and column. If you're comparing cell to cell, that's one way to look at it. And that might be the argument, but then you don't know where the placement of those teachers are. And we have some districts that will have teachers that are at the high end of the scale and being paid more because they're at the high end of the scale. In a comparable district, that cell may pay more, but that district may have more teachers on the lower end of the scale. So newer teachers, less educated, what have you. And so they're being compensated, you know, on salary schedule would be maybe paying more, but they're actually West Contra Costa is paying more. So it's something to look at when you say they get paid more. Are you talking about a same teacher in the same cell, or are you talking about the average compensation of a position at West Contra Costa?
To clarify, first I want to thank you all for moving me from salary to total compensation, because that is what we need to be talking about. So thank you for correcting me on that. I am talking about not total compensation for our district. I'm just going to cut to the chase, right? And not hide the ball, right? So total compensation for our district is pretty damn high. And Dr. Wold, you can tell us where, in relation to all of the other districts in our area, where we fall on total compensation. What ranking are we?
It depends on where you're at in the salary schedule. As John was discussing, at certain cells, we are in the top quartile. In others, we're right at the median. What the settlements did do, the district prior to the salary settlements was losing a quarter of our staff each and every year.
Well, Dr. Wold, just
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in real quick, right? And I get the idea of the different cells, so I'm not, zeroing down on a particular cell. I'm asking you, and I think you have this information. I'm asking you overall on total compensation. Where do we rank? Are we first? Are we second? Are we third?
In the highest annual in our comparative groups, we're second. When you go to the average, we're about fifth.
Okay, so what is the first thing you said? In the highest what?
In the highest attainable total compensation cell. So a teacher that's worked at the max, they've hit the max, we're number 2 of our comparable 12 districts. But when you take the average, we're about number 5.
Okay, so in one view, we're number 2. In the other view, we're number 5. And that's out of how many districts?
There are 12 comparable districts that we've used for bargaining in the past.
Okay, so out of 12, for the highest part on the scale, we're number 2. Okay, and out of 12 for an average with all cells, right, we're number 5. Okay, and so now, since this is a meeting about our district, right? And so when we made changes to get ourselves up to number 2 and to move ourselves up, how did that affect class sizes? How did that affect? Tell me how do we pay for this that bump to get us there?
I can say that we are at the bottom in class size. We're number 10 out of 12. So when you look at K3 class size, there are lower class sizes in 9 of the districts, and there's 2 that are slightly worse than us. So we're on the bottom end on class size.
Right, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking very specific questions, which I think you know. What I'm asking you is, there was a point where we were much lower on the salary rankings, right? And then we jumped up because we made these agreements, right?
Yes.
What I'm asking you is, when we jumped up, when we raised salaries, did the class sizes also go up?
They did not until this last year when we did a 1-year MOU.
Okay, and so now, but we didn't raise salaries that long ago. So we raised salaries, and now the kick is starting to come. The class sizes are going up, right? Is that right?
That's what occurred, yes.
Okay, so we are partially paying for raises, whether people want to hear it or not. We are partially paying for raises with class size increases. Is that true?
I'm going to go back to what they said. We can do anything we want.
I need you to answer my question. Are we partially paying for these raises with increases in class sizes? That's a yes or no, and you know the answer.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna move on. Thank you very much for that. And everybody needs to get it. Because we make the decisions that we make, but we don't hide what we did and why we did it. Okay, because that's not transparency. All right, so that's all right. So I'm gonna go to the next question.
We're gonna cancel the rest of the agenda at the rate we're going.
May I just add a couple things for your consideration later? I am not going to refute anything that was said. Just remember that when we look at total salaries and benefits as part of, when we say it's 90% of your unrestricted budget, we're literally looking at those numbers in those big buckets of salaries and benefits. So just remember that we're not talking about just teachers. We're not talking about just your adult school people. We're talking about everyone. And that includes substitutes, temporaries, all those things. So it's just to keep in mind later on when you deep dive in this, that you may want to pull out some of that information to get a better picture.
Oh, we gave everybody a raise, but
But there's also another cost that gets driven in. The cost of pensions have significantly increased, and that wasn't part of the raises. It just added to the cost. So it isn't a direct correlation. That's why I was hesitating with the exact answer. There are multiple factors that play into that.
Tony, I know that you bargain. This is not bargaining, and I know you try to wear different hats so you can smooth things over. We'll talk about the truth while we talk about money. And there are multiple factors that go into it. I mean, because the truth of the matter is we laid off people.
Yes.
Also, okay, we laid off some teachers, we laid off classified folks, we got rid of coordinator positions. All right. So that it don't let's just have a real conversation. I got one more question. And then this is it. And I just want to be very clear. Right at this moment, I'm not advocating for anything in particular. But what I'm trying to do is make sure people really understand what happened. I'm trying to lift up the curtain so people understand what happened. So the next thing is this ongoing structural deficit. And this is for the FIGMAT people. First, I want to ask, did I hear correctly when you said we should not be using one-time dollars to, these are not the exact words that you used, and I'm paraphrasing, but that we should not be using one-time dollars to basically stay afloat with this structure. You didn't use the word stay afloat, but to manage the structural deficit or whatnot, or to, I can't remember your exact words. Can you repeat that so I understand it and know I heard correctly?
Sure.
She talked about the best practices around one-time funds.
Right.
Use them for one-time uses.
And that's exactly it. That's the bottom line, right? That is the bottom line best practice. What I will say, and many of you have been here before, and I'm sure Bill can think of a number of districts that have struggled with this, is that, you know, there is a time to take one-time dollars to buy yourself the ability to really thoughtfully decide how you're going to deal with the issue. So there's nothing wrong with saying, okay, we were able to, and I'm not speaking about any particular type of funds right now, because I don't want to give misinformation about the legal uses of some of the one-time funds that are out there right now. But using one-time funds to help you or help the district step down, for lack of a better term, into a different fiscal picture. So whether that allows you to use attrition rather than layoffs, whether that allows you to come up with a consensus on how to structure a certain program, whether it gives you time to look at why you're declining in enrollment, all of those things, those are good uses for one-time dollars, but they're still one-time dollars. So yes, the best practice is don't spend it on something that you aren't going to lose at the end of it. So don't pay for ongoing expenses with it. But having fund balance, which is essentially one-time money, or one-time money coming into the district at any given time, I mean, you can be intelligent with it and use it to your advantage to help you get somewhere.
Ma'am, so this is my 5th year on the board, and I heard that same statement, not from you guys, 5 years ago.
Everyone.
So my
everyone.
question is, yeah, how many years does the board sit on the pot before it gets off?
Right.
I mean, how many years do we keep hearing staff members say, hey, we can float this, and hey, we got these one time, we could bridge it. I've been hearing that for 5 years. So
Yep.
Is it healthy for in the 5th year for us to be doing the same thing? Or do we need to figure out how to get out of this damn structural deficit?
Both. And the reason I'm going to say that, and I hear your frustration, I have felt your frustration, because every year there seems to be something that comes along that allows you to keep limping along. One of the bottom lines of how we have to deal with our budgets is because of how we're funded through the state. So you are automatically put in that position every year to say, well, okay, we can float it along a little, but not all the way. But as I said before, the factors change all the time. So yes, from our perspective, you want to get out of a structural deficit. To the zero penny may never happen because you're constantly working with things that are changing. But the idea is you want to right size your budget that ongoing dollars are paying for ongoing things, so that you're not finding yourself 5 and 10 years down the line still patching things together, because what will happen is people will forget that it's one-time money. So keeping it at the forefront when you're talking about things, yes, we're doing this, but what's our plan to get out of that is very important. I will also say that using them very targeted, where you're constantly going over what are we using these for is important, so that the entire community knows where the dollars are going. No one would recommend that you build a reserve that is, 400%. That's not helping your kids today. But you do have to have a reserve so that it's not a crisis the day that you find out from Dr. Wald, uh-oh, we're losing 200 kids. It shouldn't be a crisis. You should have the ability with some fund balance or some one-time funds to make thoughtful decisions or to weather something that was temporary. So I don't know that I answered your question, but it's being mindful and being out there with what you're doing so you know what's happening. And unfortunately, things change every year through the California state budget process.
But it shouldn't take, and I get that things change, there's all kinds of situations. I mean, heck, we're in a pandemic now. So, I mean, I get that, it's a fluid situation, but should it take 5 years to put a plan into place where at the end of 5 years, I don't have your beautiful voice telling me that we're at high risk for fiscal insolvency after 5 years?
Well, thank you. You're the first one that's ever said I had a beautiful voice. So thank you for that. You're my favorite now. And, but I can't honestly, you're asking me to put a time frame on something that is very particular to your district. If you as a governing board say 5 years is too long, that's up to you all to figure out how you're going to make that happen. You all have that power, and that is in fact your job, is to look at the safeguard of the district and keep it fiscally solvent. So if you believe 5 years is too long, that's great. What are you all going to talk about then?
I'm going to ask one last question, and then we could go to the solution questions that Trustee Reckler has, wants to lead us in. If we were serious about resolving our structural deficit, based on your experience, if we put a plan in place, how long should it take for us to get that plan implemented and then we're done?
You're asking me to put a timeline on something I can't do, sir. And that is, it depends on what you're trying to achieve and how fast you want to achieve it.
Well, right. Well, you can kind of. I could, because what I'm saying to you is based on your experience, and don't, and I get we got Walt here or whatnot. I need the answer, right? That's like you told, that's your job, right? To help us with this.
Right.
So
no, and that's exactly it.
So if we are serious, and I'm not saying that you could put it down to the day, I'm saying if we are serious about resolving our structural deficit, based on your experience and Mr. Von Flu's experience, if we were serious as a district about doing that, how long should it take a serious district, based on your experience, to put a plan in place and to resolve their structural deficit based on what our structural, using the size that our structural deficit is, which you would know because you just basically audited us.
Right. So are you looking at a scorch and burn approach? Well, I'm being honest. I'm being serious.
Let's do low, medium, and high. Let's do scorch and burn.
Give us three. Give us scorch and burn.
Scorch and burn. You're going to get there in a year or two.
Okay, so a year or two. Give us, people are in the middle. People are uncomfortable, but we're pushing them.
You're probably still looking at 3 to 5, depending.
Okay, so 3 to 5 years. And the last one is where we're at, which is never. Okay.
Which is basically limping along and
Limping
waiting
along.
for the next
I'll just tell you,
savior
I'm
of
going to
dollars.
present in a minute a 3 to 5 year plan that does move that direction.
But I
3 to
also,
Can I just say this really quick and I'm gonna be quiet? Okay, 3 to 5 years, Dr. Woe, you won't be here in 3 to 5 years. I won't be here in 3 to 5 years. This is what happens in local government all the time. People put in 5-year plans for after they know everybody's gonna be gone and nothing ever changes. So you know what I just heard is that if we were serious, we could do this in 2. I would love to see a 2 to 3 year plan because some of us will still actually be here. And because that's that local government game that people play all the time. I don't want to play that.
If I may make a comment on this, I think it depends on how your structural deficit is, why you have the structural deficit. If it's because of a compensation increase or class sizes, so some of those things are staffing levels, whatever. So some of those things are easier to identify. What the causation of this, or one of the major causes of this, is a declining enrollment. And with a declining enrollment, you have to continually make adjustments. So you might be able to make an adjustment to get this year's or within 2 years to make your deficit go away. But in that period, you're still declining. If you're still declining enrollment, now you've got to make additional cuts. So it might be a continual process to make sure that you're adjusting based on your revenues for the year and projected costs. So it's an active approach. I know that, we didn't analyze this, but from my conversations with Dr. Wold, the district has come a long way to fix structural deficit that they've had over the last few years. Have gone a long way to get to where they are now. They haven't been ignoring it. There's been a lot of advancement coming over the last few years, but it still exists looking forward. So it's one of those things that the conversation has to happen frequently, regularly, and adjustments need to be made, actions need to be made on a regular basis.
Trust record, I'm gonna be quiet. I'm giving you the gavel back. I took your meeting. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I just get a little hot when we talk about money.
I know.
So I'm gonna let you go.
I appreciate
burning
your
a little
passion.
hot.
So the one thing before anybody forgets, Dr. Wold or Ms. Vega, if you would download the chat, because I think this is going to lead into a pre-budget workshop later on. So the big question here is, I read the report. I want to understand, I certainly have ideas on what we need to tackle first, but we have the experts in the room. And so I'd like your professional opinion in how we use this report, what your suggestion is for how what we tackle first, how we tackle it, and how we codify it through board action is really the what I'd like to cover in the rest of your time here. And then have Mr. Clark weigh in with anything.
So, and John, jump in anytime. I think that we've been talking about exactly that this whole time, which is getting a handle on and making sure everyone is clear. What is the ongoing or structural deficit of the district based on the current factors? And looking at that each time something changes, so you keep an eye on how much that is. But 90% of your budget in the unrestricted general fund is on people. So that would make sense that you're going to have to at least focus and have some conversations there. I'm not recommending that you do anything in particular, but I don't know how you have conversations for a 1 or 2 or 20-year plan that doesn't involve one of your largest stakeholder groups, which is your employees who provide the service that you serve students with. So it is a big part of your district budget, but there are also some other areas that with the current influx of one-time dollars have given you some breathing room, and that's the area of cash management. Essentially now when a district is insolvent, you can be insolvent on paper in your budget, and you can even, your budget can be negative, but you may still have cash. And so with the reprieve of one-time dollars, that allows you to build cash reserves. So paying great attention to cash management and your cash flow, making sure that you're looking at those at a minimum of 2 years, not just a 1 year because it's got to go to the county at a certain time, but really looking at that and paying attention. Those are going to be some big areas. You know, collective bargaining agreements, it's every district. It's an area where you all have to look at the affordability and how you're going to afford it. Again, you know, you wanted to give a raise, that's great. How are you going to pay for it? Those are things that you can be very transparent about. As far as enrollment, it's nothing new. You can focus on trying to turn that tide, but you need to look at why you have declining enrollment. It's very easy to say, oh, well, it's because our class sizes are too large, or we don't offer this, or we don't offer that. You have to really look at the demographics of the areas that your district serves and really be truthful and honest about what those reasons are so that you can counteract those. And, you know, so looking at those things, paying attention to not allowing things to creep in and surprise you, like other funds going negative. You had some contribution to some other funds. It sounded like, talking to staff, maybe that was righted now, but keeping your eye on that, you don't want a surprise that suddenly you're having to make a large contribution to another fund. And then my last point would be, can you scroll back up to the page? Yeah, keep going right there. Up, back down. So in this general area, you know, you have the fund balance that is going to hinge off of the rest of it. But other than that, you probably do need to look at facilities. I mean, if you are in a long-term decline, it costs a lot of money to run facilities. So I'm saying it knowing that it is an awful conversation to have. And I have been involved in several school closures. It is never fun, and they're not fun conversations. But when you start losing enrollment over time, and you only have 10% of your unrestricted budget to use, you're going to have to look at those.
Yep. Yeah, I've been through some of those conversations. They were not fun. Oh my gosh, awful. Okay, so this is basically so we're going to be looking at these percentages here to guide us. So if this comes into the 4.9 on collective bargaining, we're going to be paying more attention to that first, and we're going to follow that up with cash management. And is that our?
My suggestion with that would be go over the key points that Robbie and I talked about, and those in the summary. We really pulled and wanted to pull out issues into the summary.
Okay.
This gets a little bit granular that staff might need to look at to adjust a few things to create some efficiencies when you get down to those percentages. But the summary is really where you should develop your list to triage.
Okay. All right, that's helpful too, because I did read all of that and I saw certain crossovers, things that we'd already fixed. You know, like you picked up on our safety plans and stuff like that. We actually already fixed that. I see some things in charter schools. Those are actually in the works in our charter school committee, along with our policy and things of that sort. So, you know, there are some things in the works in different little pieces. And then how does the board codify this?
It's really having these conversations with your entire board and adopting an action plan. And it needs to be specific. You know, I'll be very straightforward and say, having a plan that says, oh, we'll cut $1 million off our budget every year for the next 3 years is not going to get you anywhere.
No, you just said what I wanted you to say. Thank you. So you need a structured action plan that's brought to the board.
That's very specific. It's very specific. And I would work very closely with your county office, because they will also be able to guide you on those plans that say, yeah, that's a realistic plan. No, this is just words on a page.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Great. That was perfect.
If I may add, I know we only have 2 board members here, but I think, and I know You need to
More
get,
than
you need to
two,
get in.
there's people in the audience too.
Yeah,
Okay, but that we're talking to, interacting with. You know, I think the one thing that I see that boards don't do is they don't come together to say, we need to address this issue. And so while I don't think, you know, cutting $1 million is sufficient enough to like of a plan, the commitment to correct the deficit spending is a huge commitment that all the board needs to be behind. Then get to the details behind it and don't stop with just a commitment to stop deficit spending, because that doesn't give you the details and the action items behind it. But that commitment starts, and then the district proposes different options and you take action on those options.
Okay. Yeah, that was good. Okay.
Trustee Reckler, is it? I'm gonna shut up until you let me talk. I'm gonna go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm done. I was just looking at this list to see if there was anything else. I mean, he said exactly what I wanted him to say, so, you know, I'm good. I'm good.
I saw you go like, you did it. You stopped talking. I saw you. So, Trustee Reckler, I think that the full board needs to hear this. Because I'm tired of being in board meetings and saying that we're going to go into bankruptcy and people looking at me like I'm crazy. We are at a high risk of insolvency. I say that for a reason when I talk about bankruptcy and board meetings, and people think I'm making it up because I don't want to give somebody a raise or something. I'm just telling the truth. This needs to come to the full board, and the full board needs to hear this summary. The folks from FCMAT need to be able to come back in and say these things. Wall needs to come in, and we need to set aside and let the board ask the questions or whatever, talk about the 90%. I think I heard 94%, but talk about the 90%, the correlation. But we need to have this. And then what needs to happen is the recommendation that comes out of this committee, in my opinion, needs to be that we send this to the board, and that after the board listens to all of this, the board directs the superintendent, which would be along with Wall, but the board directs the superintendent to bring back an action plan for us to adopt. And yes, we can have a discussion about it, but bring back an action plan for us to adopt, for us to eliminate our deficit. And I get it. When I say eliminate, things get changed. So eliminate doesn't mean in 3 years it's zero, right? Because something can happen. It's a fluid situation. I totally understand that. But an action plan to eliminate our deficit, our structural deficit, within 2 to 3 years.
so we had planned to have FCMAT come back. That's already been in the works.
Yeah, but I
Okay.
don't think you planned
'Cause I
that
have
2
a-
to 3 year elimination part.
Okay, but here's one of my closing questions. So when do we call FCMAC back? So it's right there.
The next board meeting, when we put this on the agenda.
When do we see you again, FCMAT?
So we normally will present these to the full board. That is our normal operation. So we're already prepared to do that. And I'm understanding you're still in a remote meeting situation. Let me know if that changes. I think our plan was to come to your June 9th board meeting. I think that was at the time that we talked with Dr. Wald,
Yep.
the next regular board meeting. I don't know if things have changed since then. So
And that's when we do the public hearing for the budget anyway, so it aligns to a very specific budget night.
Okay, that's great. Okay, yeah, so pretty much, I mean, I have a few other little questions, but it's late and I can get them answered. They're really not important. And then does Mr. Clark want to weigh in at all before we kind of wrap this?
And then we do have public comment too.
Oh, and we have public comment. Okay.
Trustee Reckler, thank you. I candidly, I'm impressed with some of the comments from Mr. Phillips and yourself about really honestly addressing the structural deficit. I can say from the county office perspective, I know Superintendent Mackey's here, it was really touch and go. We were very concerned. And I think FCMAT has done a good job, Robbie's done a good job explaining how things have progressed and you've come along and you've made a lot of progress. I just want to recognize that, both the board and the administration, and getting things done, fixing processes, system issues, training staff, getting your budget process down, position control. There's been a lot of milestones along the way. But I think you do have your finger on what needs to be done next. And I appreciate your candor, your honesty about addressing that issue and being willing to take that forward for some more discussion. That's sort of my comment. I don't know if Superintendent Mackey wants to make a comment.
I will find her and allow her to. She is, if she does, she can unmute.
Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Yes.
No, I agree and I support what Deputy Clark said. I think it's admirable and really necessary that you start taking a hard look at these structural deficits and move forward. So I appreciate you all doing this work and I appreciate FCMAC, the work that they are doing with you.
Thank you so much for that comment. It's good to hear from you also. Haven't heard from you in a while. Okay. All right. So anything more on this from President Phillips? Otherwise, we'll go to public comment. And then we're going to have to readjust our agenda because we're never going to get through this.
I'm ready to pivot. It's all good.
I'm
Okay.
setting up now. I'm done.
Okay.
All right. So we have 2 hands raised.
Okay.
There.
Let's go with a minute and a half since we're short on time, if that's okay.
All right. I'm going to get out of the share.
You
And
sound like me.
first one is Jessica Ross. You may unmute.
Hi, all. Thanks for engaging in the chats that I put in as questions on the side and information. Looking in budgets and cash flows over time, budgets can tell a lot of stories. And so I really want to caution us toward just looking at one end of it or creating our own story from it, because we can really craft any number of things from that. What I think would be really helpful prior to this going to the full board so that everyone can really get an unbiased view of what's going on is to calculate, to put it, to demonstrate revenue and expenditures and some suggestions for both, right? So we did a lot of what we talked about today was expenditures, and it would be really great to think about revenues. And the question I have is specifically, if we're at 90% instead of 88% in terms of staffing, what I want to know is what separates us from those other like top 1, 2, 3, 4 in the people you mentioned, Dr. Wold, in the districts you mentioned that have where we lie in like the middle percent for benefits, right? Like the ones that have higher benefits from us who are still not at 90%. What are they doing that's different from us so that we can come up with ways to bring funding down, maybe, but at the same time, holding on to some of the things that really have mattered to the educators in our district. The other question I have is I love the idea of bringing in the question of why are people leaving the district, because doing something about that would be really beneficial. And I think that that's actually all I have, but I really value the conversation here and all of the different directions. I think doing an external audit on that 90% issue would be really helpful. Thank you.
So we had another hand and it went down. So I'm not sure if.
I thought it was Anton Younger.
Yeah, so he doesn't normally do that. So I'm going to just in case, see if he's unmuted.
Yeah, can you just unmute Mr. Young?
Yeah, I did. I unmuted him. But I don't see him talking, so he might have actually put it down himself.
All right, maybe we answered his question.
Okay, so I'm going to remove that. That's it for public comment on this item.
Okay, well, that was super helpful. That was great, actually. Of course, we ran long, but that was a really good conversation. So if you'll remember to download the chat, because that, I think that's very helpful. And then in closing, I don't know if Mr. Clark is going to stay with us, but in case he's going to drop off the line, I want to thank County Superintendent Mackey for being here. I also want to thank Mr. Clark for holding us for all of these years, especially the last few, which we were more than a handful, and I really appreciate your support. And I wish you the best on your future endeavors, and please leave your cell phone number.
Oh, I have the number.
Thank you very much.
I just want to quickly say thank you to Deputy Superintendent Clark, Superintendent Mackey, that really orchestrated this being done in a good manner. And Robbie and John and their boss, Mike Fine, have been an asset to us as we've started this journey. And we're not done by any stretch, but I will quickly show that we are using a lot of different leverages to keep us moving forward, and in some cases kick the can. But the one piece that is important if you're going to get rid of a structural deficit is spending that most restricted dollar first and trying to hold back on spending those unrestricted. And so what you'll see is when we get COLA, we put it against the structural deficit. We don't put it to new spending. But when we get concentration dollars and other categoricals, we put it to spending. So it's a balanced approach. And we really appreciate the areas that they singled out that are helping us to do a better job, and the county's support as well. So before they dropped off, I wanted to thank them for really looking out for us and not sugarcoating that everything's perfect, because I'm going to say it's all good.
Well, I wouldn't, but ditto the support coming from in the trenches, my staff, and support from the county office. Bill, known you many, many years, mentor to me in all 3 districts that I've worked at within Contra Costa County. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Too much, you guys. I really appreciate it. But I want to let me just give one last comment here. I can tell you that we were in some very important discussions with the FICMAT team all the way through, and I want to compliment them not only on their experience and knowledge, but it is the finesse that they used in making it possible to carry plans forward. They could have come in much stronger, and they work with us. And so I want to just reach out to John and Mike. Robbie, haven't worked as much with you, but you guys have an excellent approach in terms of managing unique situations in a way that contributed to a positive outcome. So I want to thank you as well.
Absolutely, I agree. It was very smooth, and I have their numbers as well. They reached out, and now I have some connections that if I have questions, they said I can contact them as well. So thank you both, Robbie and John, as well. Thank you, Bill.
Okay, you guys take care.
Okay, thank you very much. And to the FICMAC team, we'll be seeing you on June 9th. So
Great, thank you very much.
we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Okay, so with our remaining time at 4:36, what do we want to do? We have one-time funding, we have the governor's May revise, and then we have this concepts for a pre-budget workshop, which I now think is like super important. If we have all these questions, and we've had the questions from our other parent groups.
If I can make a recommendation, I
Sure.
think we can put the the presentation, we can configure that offline and get the elements done there. And I can quickly do some bullets on what is happening with all the different pots of money, because I think that is an issue that everyone wants to know. What has the governor money man put out there, and what's real and what's not real, and what do we know and what do we not know? And I think I can do that fairly quickly, because I won't go into as deep a detail as I normally do, to at least give a snapshot if that works. So I can do both one time and governor in the same presentation.
Okay, and then we want to, all right, we have to come back though for this pre-budget workshop. I want to publicly say that I tried to take this on for a number of months, and it's just been absolutely crazy.
Well, I
ended up-
assumed we're gonna get something on the books and actually do, whether it's a special budget meeting or whatever, to get that to happen before the 9th. So we'll actually commit to doing something before the 9th and inviting everyone.
Okay, all right, and then for the summer to map out the rest of that planning, I mean, I have
Mhm.
one course done. And that's
Great.
that's as far as I've been able to get, so,
Gina's ready to present.
okay, good. So I did how California funds schools, that one's done. The rest need to get planned out. Okay, so then let's move to table 2D, and want to go ahead with one-time funding.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen again and try to quickly run through. Some of the slides are new, so it'll be fairly easy to bring them up. Let's get the right one here. Here we go. Let's see here. Do you see one-time funding?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so then I'll put it in presentation mode so that it's bigger for everyone there. All right, so I'm gonna go quick there. I'm gonna gloss over, we've already talked about all of our cuts there. So prior to the May revision, we did know several things that were gonna change in the state budget. We had a deficit of 18 million. The COLA, that the 3.84% reduced that deficit down, but then additional spending for special ed that happens every year brought it back up. The fact that our enrollment is down brings it back up. The fact that we get additional costs in unemployment, STRS, PERS, insurance brings it back up. But then we have some one-time monies that brought it back down. So it kind of goes up and down, and that's the challenge is, as they said, you have to be able to look at what does your budget look like with or without one-time monies. And so we started to really try to do that. And that's where, if I can get this to go forward, there we go. So we've received several pots of one-time money. We've received CARES Act, which that and ESSER 1 from the federal government was a combined $40 million over 2 years. We spent 16 last year and 24 this year. We have ESSER 2, which was the Trump money. That's 24 million coming for next year. We then have ESSER 3, which is the Biden money, which will come a little bit in the 2 years. So 26 and 24, approximately 50 million. We then, the state started throwing some one-time monies into the pot. We have what's called the IPI, in-person instruction grant. That money, that 8 million, we got it, and we're spending it right now for the intervention programs that we're running. We have what's called the ELO, the Extended Learning Opportunities Grant. That's approximately 20 million. That will start to be spent in 3.5 weeks when we open up 40 schools for summer. And then the rest is being built into what additional services we're going to have for the fall regarding supports for students. This is just a chart that we've shown many times, and FCMAT talks about making sure that you have all of your different costs quantified so you can see we account for everything that's going to happen and increase. It's built into the operational budget. Special ed, you can see we know it goes up, so we've got it built in each time to go forward. This is showing what we've done with CARES Act. We talked a lot about the 24 million in CARES Act this year. It is helping us not make some significant crash or scorch and burn cuts. We're maintaining some services. Those services will then be able to be covered by ESSER 2 next year and ESSER 3 the following year. Simultaneously, as other resources come through, we try to shift those things either through attrition, stop doing certain things, and in a sense make soft cuts so that we don't have to use reserves in the end for ongoing expenses. But if you ask where is our structural deficit, it's sitting in these pieces right here that we're funding with these funds, that's where our structural deficit is. It's being covered by one-time monies over a period of 2 years. And with the May revise, maybe even 3 years now. And we know what these potentially are. So we're trying to keep the most restricted things in one place and not do new ongoing out of these dollars. So this again goes back to how do we cover it? CARES Act, ESSER 2, ESSER 3, which uses those funds up. So now they're outside of the equation. So this is what it looks like. This year, 396 million in revenue. Expenditures of 390 because some of it is kind of being used over 2 years. Our fund balances grow. We leave the committed reserve of 24, repopulate Fund 17 back to where it was, and Fund 71, which is our OPEB, gets repaid. We then go forward the next year. Our revenue, notice even though I know ESSER is there, it's not put in the revenue. It's right below so you can see the two differences, but all of our expenses are there. So you can see there is a structural deficit. Part of it is we're spending down some of the money that came late, but you can see, oh, if that wasn't there, we'd have a problem. So it's super clear that you can see, and this is what FCMAT's talking about, really making sure that you define it. And that's why we tried to build it this way. You can see once that one-time revenue comes in, okay, the fund balance goes down a little bit because of the extra from this year, but those reserves stay the same. Then you go to the next year, revenue goes up. Now this is before May revise, and I haven't updated it. Regina and I are working on that, and you'll see a slightly bigger number here. But then we bring in the ESSER to cover the ESSER 3 to cover that same structural deficit. Again, if this was gone, there would be your issue. Some of those expenses are one-time. They're PPE, they're additional technology, they're things that instantly go away if the dollars go away, but some are not. So that's why it's built in there. And you can see we still have the reserves. But that spends our one-time funds. Yes.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, sir.
So for all the people in the world who've ever been broke and have had credit cards at different times, right? Because I keep hearing you say covering our structural deficit. And for me, covering our structural deficit means I paid off my credit card bill. But what I'm hearing is that I'm just figuring out how to get enough money to make the minimum payment, and the credit card debt, the deficit, the structural deficit is still there. I'm just getting enough money to cover my minimum payment every month. And where it says on that thing on the side, if I keep paying the minimum payment, it's going to take me 35 years to pay it off. That's what I'm hearing. So are we really covering the structural deficit, or are we just getting enough money to make that minimum credit card payment so we don't, so that don't put us in monopoly jail? Which one is it?
It's in between.
Yeah,
so it's in between. And what I mean by that is some of the expenses in here are directly related to COVID that we're covering, that if all circumstances change could stop being done without much action. Some of them are supports that we would then have to make a hard decision on.
Well, Doc, real quick, I'm not talking about COVID. I get COVID, it's its own beast, and there's one-time monies coming in specifically for COVID. I get that. So I'm not talking about COVID right now. I'm talking about pretend COVID's not here. Are we just really, we're saying we're covering our deficit, but are we really just getting enough money, figuring out how to get enough money? Say, wait a minute, so I can pay my minimum credit card bill?
Yeah, we're
okay. So that's not covering the structural deficit. That's paying the minimum credit card bill. Let's talk about it like what it really is, and let's talk about it in ways that regular folks understand. Because what we're doing right now is not being, I'm not gonna say we're not being honest, but we're talking over people's heads in ways that they don't understand. And that is not actually only not covering the deficit, it's hiding it, because we're not covering it. We're paying the minimum credit card bill so we can stay afloat.
That's the simplest way to put it. If this number was not there, this balance would be a much bigger negative number. And we have to have a plan. If this is not going to go up permanently, then this has to be going down. And that's the plan you were talking about, wanting to have a conversation about. And that's why it's listed this way, so that we can have a conversation about, okay, what does that entail? And what does that entail? And what in here has to go away if that's no longer there? So that's, we're saying the same thing, I hope, in that sense that you are correct.
That's the way I could understand it, because I paid
Yeah.
the minimum bill before.
Yeah, so that analogy, if that works, moving on. So moving on to this, because I do want to get into the other pieces here real quick. Come on. So this just shows again the other one-time pot of money, the IPI money. We got it, we spent it, it's gone. So it just came in, it went out. Don't even prepare for it. This 20 million that we just received, which is the ELO, we're going to be spending it on summer. It is going to be used to support some things for fall. Some of the things that will be part of our collective bargaining agreements will be built into there. We'll then protect it again with ESSER 3. And now there's some additional ELO coming from the state that will extend it another year, and very likely pieces of it in perpetuity. So I'll talk about that. That's ongoing in just a minute. That isn't in this slide, but it's coming up. So to show just this one-time money that everyone knew, we decided to put it in colors. So you can see if it's blue, we're buying the same thing with a different set of money each year. So that's your minimum credit card bill example that you were talking about. The yellows are one and dones, meaning it's something that we won't need the next year, but we're spending it because we need it right now. PPE, ventilation, things like that, that you have to do. So that's there. The green is the brand new summer plan that we're trying to make sure that, again, summer, we can do it, we can stop doing it. We're trying to keep it structured. So it's those 2-year services. And that's what that extended learning grant is. So here I'm going to flip now and show you with all those other one-time monies what happens. I had showed you 396 and 398 went up, because what happened is this was 390, but this was also, you see, we add the 8 million in, we take the 8 million there too. It goes no change in fund balance. If I go back, you'll see the 5.7, the 4.3, and the 2. What you'll see is it's the exact same numbers, because we put the one-time money in and we put the expense in equal to it. So it's in and out, and we know what we're buying, so we can get rid of it if we have to. So we're back to only dealing with the initial credit card bill. And so now we go into what is the new state funding. So there were quite a few one-time things that were added in. Some of them are significant for us. These are areas that can focus on additional counselors, reduce class size, future enhancement of transitional kindergarten, increased preschool, teacher training and recruitment, expanded learning for elementary students, full service community schools, targeted interventions. There's a large set of different programs, but they're really, for the most part, not ongoing. The one that is right here. New concentration grant funding, 1.1 billion in ongoing funding that is not in that budget I just showed you. It increases the concentration grant from 50% of the base grant to 70% of the base grant. And remember, we get that concentration for every student over 55% in our district. We're at just over 71%. And the intent for that money is to increase the number of people that serve kids. Plain and simple, that's what it's for. That's what the state is saying. It's for counselors, teachers, paraprofessionals, nurses, etc. It does need to be incorporated in the LCAP. So we'll have some narrative pieces in it. but this is the one big piece of ongoing funds that is restricted that's coming into the budget right now. The next one, and I think we might have lost Trustee Reckler for a second. So I'll check on the attendees as I'm kind of paying attention. Give her just a second to come back in if she can. There she is. Got her. Bringing her back.
We have 7 minutes left, by the way.
I can finish in 2, maybe 3. All right. I believe Trustee Reckler's back, so I'm going to keep going. So then you have the targeted intervention grant. This is $2.6 billion in one-time funding over 2 years for tutoring, re-engagement, closing learning gaps, increasing instructional opportunities for students. We don't know exactly what it's going to have rules or regs, so it's not in our budget yet and what our percentage is, but this is in the proposal. The next one that's in the proposal from the governor is in another piece of in-person instruction grant that needs to be used by 2023, so a year and a half. And this is for sanitation, COVID testing, ventilation, additional learning spaces, and salaries for in-person instruction. So this may have some significant flexibility for us as well. It is not in our budget yet. So we haven't, because we're waiting to see how it gets quantified and going through. Next one is a big deal. This is ongoing. And this is to improve what's happening with extra time for elementary. It's starting with $1 billion next year. It's supposed to grow to $5 billion statewide. It's going to be an increase to the concentration grant, which is another place where we will be eligible. The intent is to, at the most needy schools, increase their day to 9 hours for students. So add up to 30 days of summer school or intercession with at least that 9-hour expanded learning. It's really trying to take the ACES grant and super fund it there. So we're waiting for the details. It's supposed to have smaller class size in the outside pieces to it. So this is another area, not in our budget yet, but it looks like we would be well poised to benefit from this in some way. Universal transitional kindergarten is coming. It begins not next year, but the year following, with a $900 million investment growing to $2.7 billion. In addition, they also provide some additional funds ongoing, starting in 22-23, from $380 million to $740. Those funds are to hire staff, basically instructional aides, to be in the TK classroom. And what it does is it changes the age, the date on which you have to be 5. Right now, you need to be 5 before December. Now it pushes it back a year from now to March, then to June, and then all the way back to if you are 5 years old on September 2nd. If you're 4 years old on September 1st, you're in to transitional kinder. It does have some one-time funds for facilities of about $190 million that you could use for portables. We don't know how that grant's going to play out. My guess is you really needed to do this across the state. You probably needed about 19 billion, but hey, 190 million is a start on the facilities. Next one is educator effectiveness training. Quite a few grants to start getting more teachers into the program. A $20,000 grant to support special ed teachers to get their credentials. And then they have to make a 4-year commitment to work in the district. Residency support for up to 22,000 teacher candidates to participate in local residency or grow your own programs. Stipends for national board certified teachers to work in at-risk schools and commit to those. And then another 1.5 billion for over 3 years for support and training of certificate and classified and administrative staff on restorative practices and inherent bias training. So a big significant investment in building the teacher workforce. Another one extremely important to us is $3 billion is proposed to expand full service community schools. We already have that at our secondary schools, but there's been a lot of talk about supports for elementary. This would tie directly into that need and the ability to expand those full service community wraparound services for our elementary. And again, this looks to come in the LCAP flavor of money. So again, we would be poised well to get these. None of those are in the budget or being spent right now until we have all the details. I suspect that this summer, we're going to need to convene several stakeholder groups to have significant conversation about all of these different one-time things, because you can't just use them all for positions. You need to use them systemically as we go forward. But there is a lot of positives coming in the budget. The one that we are utilizing in bargaining is the one for staffing, which also allows us to use restricted dollars instead of unrestricted towards that goal. So that is an update of where we're at.
So if it's okay, I'd like to make a motion just to extend for 10 minutes. And then I'd like to move to public comment immediately, and then we can come back and do some questions if that's okay, and then just be done.
We can extend Trustee Reckler on my wife's birthday.
That's
You
it.
already
And then
got my son. Now you're getting
That's
my
okay.
wife.
You got my husband.
But go
Guess what?
ahead.
We're doing this on my birthday too, coming up. So
Go ahead.
it's a present
so-
for us.
Okay, so just 10 minutes. I'll move.
All right.
All right, and then let's do public comment.
We
then
just
can
have
do-
one, so I'm gonna allow
This is gonna be Miss
Jessica
Sturgis.
a minute and a half.
Oh, it wasn't Miss Sturgis?
No, it's me again.
Okay.
Dr. Wood, would you mind putting up the slide with the green and yellow with the cash flow document?
Working on it.
Thank you. Oh, up two. The other green and yellow one. Yeah. Okay, so I want to clarify on this slide that this is a cash flow document which shows a snapshot of what's happening at points in time. And Dr. Wold, you have mentioned this at various points in time as well. You always say that about that slide. The number that I don't understand on here is that I think is really important for us to see is what the actual amount of money that is left at the end of the year is in each of these snapshots. So what the actual fund balance is when the year is up, because in a given year, it's really okay if we are in the red a little bit or in the black a little bit. It means that we are spending on something that we really need in that year. So for instance, in a moment of COVID, we're spending stuff on PPE, we're spending stuff on, connecting even more sort of external mental health resources because we don't already have those in our schools. That's okay to spend in a given year. So it's not a problem to have that like 2.0 million in that one spot. What is a problem is if our balance is continuously going down. And so that's like the thing that I think is really important to check on. We're talking a lot of one-time funding, but even in the one-time presentation, Dr. Wold, that you're giving, there were some funds that were actually ongoing. So I think there are two ways that I think about that. With the ongoing funds, I think we should be really clear about, which one of those are guaranteed, which one of those are potential, and then what we want to do with that definite ongoing ones. With the one-time funding, I want to once again encourage us to think about revenue in addition to expenditures, because we're talking so much about expenditures and then about just sort of the funding that's coming in. But if we use one-time funding for things that will bring people into our district in the future, we can get revenue that way. And the equivalent of that, to provide like a real life example, I loved what you were saying, Trustee Phillips, President Phillips, about like the credit card thing, right? It's like, think about when you hire a a fundraising manager for an organization that really needs funding. Okay, I'll finish real quick.
10 seconds.
You pay the money for that fundraiser because you know they'll bring in more money. I wonder what we can do with the one-time funding that brings us in longer term money.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's it for the hands up.
Ms. Gurgis doesn't have anything?
I will unmute her and see.
Good afternoon. This is Cindy Gurgis. Thank you so much for having me. I did send my reports via email, and I can just reiterate some of our asks. Some of them are continued asks, and they really are around transparency. And we have worked with Dr. Wool to get closer to providing more of the LCAP, more in the LCAP, including the base funding. And we also had some items around the learning continuity plan spending and really wanting to know where the supplemental and concentration dollars, how they were spent. Additionally, there's we wanted an update on the ASTAT program budget. There was a chart published in October, and we wanted to really understand where the rest of the funding went. And then we had some specific questions around school level budgeting and really understanding how, with the new pandemic really funding and with the ongoing title funding, how those are dispersed to school sites to really understand that. And then now with the new pandemic funding, just generally wanting to have some sort of chart or mechanism where we're really seeing the funding sources, how much is being spent, how much is going to be spent in the following years, and what the plan is for those funds, and just really wanting to work with the district to see how we can make sure that those funds are accessible to community. It's a record amount that's coming in with the May revise, and we're hopeful and ready to partner with community and the district to really make sure that those funds do make a difference, and that they're used in an effective manner, and would like to partner with the district if there's an opportunity to do so. Thank you.
All right, that will be it for public comment.
Okay, I just have really a couple of, I really have just at this point one question, which is on all these one-time funds, when you bring, when we have this budget bonanza on June 9th, are you going to bring for all these one-time funds the amount received and what is remaining? Is there going to be like a budget or a breakdown for every line item?
Not at the June meeting. What will happen is we'll have the overarching. Most of these one-time funds from the May revision will not be in the adopted budget. As I've always explained, because it hasn't been chaptered by the state, we can't put it in. Okay. What I will do is present exactly what I'm doing here. These are the big buckets. Hopefully by then we'll have an idea of what it might equal for us. And then the goal would be not to have it spent, to send it through a input set of task forces to then come back to the board to prioritize. What will be in there is the known expenditures there and anything that is agreed to with our collective bargaining. Most of the things that Cindy Gurgis was just talking about is the September presentation when we do unaudited actuals.
Okay,
we
so
don't
that'll
have it all right now.
Okay, so
the
that'll
way
come
that
in
everyone's
September.
looking for.
Okay. The only thing though is on the learning loss mitigations, which most of that does have to be spent.
Right, and it's being spent very quickly for getting the spring and then into the summer. So.
And then will you present any carryover or, you know?
Yes, that's unaudited actuals. Anything
okay, certifying that.
Yeah.
It's okay. Okay, that's really my only question on that. My focus really today was on FCMAT. On that, President Phillips, anything on that? Or we'll close out.
2 seconds, and this is, oh, sorry. 2 seconds, and this is a little disjointed, but this conversation has very much been focused on expenditures. But the conversation that we have had on multiple occasions in the full board meeting is revenue generation, and they really are tied together. So when you hear us talking about utilizing our vacant properties, when you hear us talking about creating new programs to hopefully grow enrollment like the CTE school, visual and performing arts school, even the new virtual school that we are starting, that is going to be open up to and should be open up to kids who don't even live in our district, if that's the option that those families want. Because that's the same thing that the charter schools try to do when they tried to come here and get the board a couple of years ago on 2 different occasions to pass petitions to allow them to open up a virtual school so they could pull basically kids from anywhere in the Bay Area counties.
Right.
There's not just ours, anywhere in the Bay Area County. So there's no reason we can't do that same thing, right? You know, Dr. Wold has been advocating very hard for us to spend what I think is a minimal amount of money to actually get an advocate for us in Sacramento. That is something, and that is very similar to the person that you just talked about, Ms. Ross, about hiring somebody that you know can help bring us in funds. That got voted down at the board. And I think partially because people didn't understand what the purpose was. But we are talking about revenue generation at the same time. It's just not the focus of this conversation. But you're right. If we are able to generate revenue, even, you know, things around attendance, right? For example, Mr. Christian has said things at different times about making sure that we can show up our attendance. Other people have as well. But if we're able to do those kinds of things, then frankly, we don't have to go as deep. When time comes for us to make cuts, we're able to sustain things for longer periods of time without operating at a structural deficit. So that conversation is happening. It just didn't happen in this meeting.
Yeah, I also want my marketing budget, so don't forget that.
Yes, and the marketing budget, because we
One-time funds is perfect.
I'm going to tell a story really quickly.
You don't have time. We're out of time.
Can I tell this story? Because it helps your marketing budget, right? It helps your marketing budget. So I had a parent called me on the phone this week, says, hey, you know, I know you're on the board, but I really don't trust the district. And gave all these reasons why they didn't trust the district. We're bankrupt and all these other kind of things, right? And then they said, ask me this on the phone, should I send my kid to a charter school? And I said this, and some people might get mad at my response, but I said, well, you know, what school is your kid at? And what school are you talking about? What is the charter school like? Give me some more context, right? And they told me the district school. I'm not going to tell you the district school, but I'm going to tell you the name of the charter school, okay? District School X. They don't feel comfortable, but they want to send their kid to a charter school. The charter school was the Mandarin school. Straight up. They were like, yeah, I want to send them to that school, the charter school where they teach them Chinese. And I said, the Mandarin school? And they said, yeah. I said, that's a district school. You could have heard a pin drop, right? And so that goes to why we really do need to market the things that we have. So see, Trustee Reckler, I'm trying to help you get your marketing budget because they were going to disenroll their child from the district to send them to the Mandarin school.
So you'll see on your shared screen, I didn't have it in
No, we
tonight.
don't have time. We're done. We're done.
No,
We're
but
done.
I just
We're done.
bring back, we do all 5. And tonight I only talked about one side, but Trustee Phillips knows there's 5 parts and we have a plan for all 5.
Yeah, we've been working on it. We've been working on it hard. Okay, so that's it on that. Let's move on to closing comments. My closing comments was that this was great. Thank you for everybody that showed up. The FICMAT meeting, that was terrific. And anybody who's still on the call, please read the FICMAT report by June 9th and come to the board meeting prepared by reading the FICMAT report. It is not hard. They did a great job. It's actually really absorbable. And it's written for common people. Yes, there's a little bit of math in it, but it's a great report. They did a great job. So that's my homework assignment for June 9th. Any other closing comments?
My only comment is this, Trustee Reckler, you constantly talk about how this is your happy place. I have laughed more in this meeting today than I have all week. So thank you for this meeting because I needed a laugh and I've been laughing my behind off.
Well, Wednesday night was pretty funny, I have to say. Dr. Harder, I still can't get over that.
That was funny. He was doing that.
That was really funny. I'm done too. Okay. Thank you to everybody. The next, we'll move on to number 4. The next budget committee meeting is Friday, June 11th, 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and everybody enjoy the weekend. We're adjourned at 5:12. Bye.